A restaurant confrontation takes an unexpected turn when a mysterious figure's hidden past is revealed. What begins as rejection ends with an offer that changes everything. But before we start, if you guys like this story, please comment below and subscribe to Story Storer. Please hit the bell icon. Thank you. The restaurant's cozy ambiance shattered under the weight of an escalating confrontation. The server, a young man with a name tag that read Kyle, stood rigid by the cash register, his face flushed with both embarrassment and indignation. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Kyle said, his voice strained but resolute. The man he addressed had a scruffy beard, a threadbare coat, and eyes that spoke of countless nights spent under the open sky. He clutched his worn hat in trembling hands. "Please," the man implored softly. "Just a cup of coffee and maybe some bread. I'll pay you back when I can." Kyle shook his head firmly. "We don't do handouts. You're making other customers uncomfortable." Heads turned from polished plates of gourmet dishes. Some patrons looked on with pity, others with disdain. The man's shoulders sagged as if carrying the weight of every rejection he had faced. Before Kyle could usher him out the door, a voice cut through the tension, sharp, authoritative. "What's going on here?" The room fell into a hushed silence. From the back office, a man in his 50s strode forward. His tailored shirt and polished shoes spoke of success, but his eyes held a warmth that belied his stern tone. Mr. Romano's sharp voice sliced through the tense air. As he emerged from the back office, his eyes swept the room, landing on the disheveled figure near the door. A flicker of recognition danced in his gaze, though he masked it well. "Is there a problem here?" Romano asked calmly. Kyle straightened. "This man's causing a disturbance." Romano's gaze softened as he focused on the man clutching a worn hat. "What's your name?" he asked. "Arthur Hayes," came the hushed reply. Romano's breath caught briefly. The name echoed from a past filled with towering triumphs and painful losses. Romano's expression remained calm, but his thoughts swirled with recognition. Arthur Hayes, the once revered architect whose designs had graced the city skyline, now stood humbled and worn. "What happened, Arthur?" Romano asked softly, steering him away from prying eyes. Arthur's voice was low, tinged with regret. "Life happened. I trusted the wrong people. Bad investments wiped me out. Then, I lost my wife." He paused, swallowing hard. "After that, everything crumbled." Romano nodded solemnly. "That's a heavy burden." Arthur's shoulders sagged. "I tried to rebuild, but doors kept closing. Eventually, I just stopped knocking." Romano's jaw tightened. No one should face that alone. Arthur glanced away, shame flickering across his face. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted a cup of coffee." Romano's voice steadied. "You've fallen, but I know the brilliance you're capable of. Let's figure this out together." Romano turned to Kyle, his tone firm but calm. "Prepare the best meal we have, and coffee, black." Kyle hesitated. "But Mr. Romano, no excuses, just do it." Arthur shifted uneasily. "You don't have to do this." Romano gestured toward a booth. "Please, sit." Arthur obeyed, though his body radiated tension. The other diners whispered, their eyes flickering between pity and curiosity. Some masked disdain behind polite expressions. As the scent of fresh coffee wafted through the room, Arthur's hands trembled when Kyle placed a steaming cup and a plate of gourmet food before him. "Thank you," Arthur said, his voice cracking. Romano sat across from him. "Eat. We'll talk after." Arthur's first bite was tentative, as though disbelief lingered on his tongue. Slowly, the nourishment seemed to rekindle something fragile within him. Hope. For the first time in a long while, Arthur allowed himself to feel human again. As Arthur ate, conversations hummed softly throughout the restaurant. Recognition sparked among some patrons. "Is that who I think it is?" a middle-aged man murmured to his companion. "It can't be," she whispered back. "But he designed the Synergy Tower, didn't he?" Arthur hunched over his plate, acutely aware of the stares. The weight of his past triumphs pressed against the fragile present. Romano observed the murmurs with a thoughtful expression. "You're remembered, Arthur," he said quietly. Arthur wiped his mouth, shaking his head. Not for the right reasons anymore. People remember the fall more than the climb. Romano leaned forward. "Talent doesn't just vanish, it's still in you, waiting." Arthur sighed. "I don't know if I can ever go back." Romano's voice was steady. "You can. You will." As the whispers grew softer, Arthur's despair dulled, replaced by the faintest ember of possibility. Romano rose from his seat, tapping the edge of the table to quiet the restaurant's murmurs. Conversations faded as curious eyes turned toward him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm yet commanding, "I'd like to share something important." The diners exchanged puzzled glances. Arthur's face flushed, a mixture of confusion and embarrassment settling in. Romano continued, gesturing toward Arthur. "This man, Arthur Hayes, has shaped the very skyline we admire every day. He's the visionary behind some of our city's most iconic structures, the Synergy Tower, Aurora Plaza, and countless other landmarks." Soft gasps rippled through the crowd. A few patrons began clapping, their applause tentative but sincere. Arthur shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "You didn't have to do that," he said under his breath. Romano smiled gently. "Sometimes people need to be reminded of their worth." The applause grew stronger, and Arthur's shoulders, long burdened by guilt and failure, seemed to ease just a little. "Thank you," Arthur whispered, overwhelmed by the unexpected recognition. Romano met his gaze. "This isn't the end of your story, Arthur. It's just a turning point." Arthur's lips quivered, gratitude shining in his eyes. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that. The applause eventually faded, replaced by a warm, buzzing energy throughout the room. Arthur, still processing the moment, sipped his coffee, his hand steadier now. Romano sat back down across from him. "You know, your talent was never just about buildings. It was about vision, creating something meaningful where there was nothing." Arthur gave a hollow laugh. "I haven't had a vision in a long time." Romano's expression softened. "Maybe you just need the right opportunity." He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "I have a project, a big one. I need someone with your expertise." Arthur blinked, disbelief flickering in his tired eyes. "You'd trust me after everything?" Romano nodded. "You've made mistakes, so have I. But redemption isn't about perfection. It's about showing up and doing the work." Arthur hesitated. "What if I'm not ready?" Romano smiled. "You'll get there, and I'll help you." Arthur's heart raced, caught between fear and hope. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes when you're ready." Arthur stared at his half-empty plate, the weight of despair lifting inch by inch. "Maybe," he said quietly, "it's time to start building again." Romano's grin widened. "Now that's the Arthur Hayes I remember." Arthur sat in silence, the warmth of the meal settling in his chest. Romano's words echoed in his mind. An offer. A chance to rebuild. For years, life had only handed him rejection, but now a glimmer of hope sparked through the cracks of his despair. "I don't know how to thank you," Arthur murmured. Romano's response was simple, Just show up. Arthur's lips trembled as he nodded. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years it wasn't completely dark. Redemption didn't seem so far away anymore. He was ready to try. As Arthur stood to leave, he felt lighter, as though shedding the weight of countless failures. The restaurant patrons returned to their meals, the earlier tension now a distant memory. Romano extended his hand. "We'll talk soon." Arthur gripped it firmly, gratitude shining in his eyes. "I'll be there." Stepping outside, Arthur paused, breathing in the crisp air. The city hummed around him, its skyline a reminder of his past triumphs, and perhaps future ones. Each step forward felt significant. With Romano's faith planted in his heart, Arthur dared to believe in a future worth building again.